Our final speaker, Dr. Charles Van Eaton, I had a very providential opportunity to meet him a couple weeks ago, and after hearing him speak at another meeting, I knew he was just the man we needed to have here tonight. Dr. Van Eaton recently retired as Distinguished Professor at Large of Economics at Bryan College. Previously, Dr. Van Eaton was Professor of Economics and Public Policy at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, and Chairman of the Department of Economics at Hillsdale College in Hillsdale, Michigan. He graduated from Memphis State University with a BS in Economics and Political Science and a PhD in Economics from Tulane University. Dr. Van Eaton is the author of over 1,100 economic policy issue columns in over 200 newspapers. He is married and a father of 4. From his years in Michigan, he witnessed firsthand the impact of unions on the automotive industry. Please help me welcome Dr. Van Eaton.
In June, last month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics of the Department of Labor issued the results of its household survey of employment. They indicate that since the start of last year, 2012, the number of people with jobs had increased by 753,000. But no fewer than 557,000 of these jobs were in fact part-time. Full-time jobs actually declined by 240,000, while part-time jobs soared to an all-time high of 28 million. There are 3 million more part-time workers who would really prefer full-time. There are 3 million more part-time positions than when the recession began in 2007. We are in the midst of the historically slowest recovery from an economic downturn in history. So that's the good news about jobs. Some years ago, when I got my first teaching job out of Tulane University, while I was simultaneously writing my dissertation in that in-between phase, I'd just gotten settled in when a senior professor at the school came to my door and was very polite. He said something to me that I had forgotten for a period of time, but then it came back to me. He was a professor of marketing, PhD, University of Arkansas. I remember that. He said to me, now you young economists, I wasn't really all that young, I'm 77 years old now. You young economists always want to do your equations and your diagrams and all of that. But I want you to remember something. There is nothing that can be called an economy until someone succeeds in selling something to someone else. Now, it took me a period of time to let that sink in. And over the years, as I've read the literature and taught classes and consulted a lot with businesses, this has all come back to me. There are no jobs, there is no economy until someone is successful in selling something to someone else. Now, you folks who work here for Volkswagen, you're doing well because you are producing a product which people want to buy. That's it. Yeah. And as long as you continue to do that, you're going to do well. But when you cease to do that, whether you have a union or not, or whether you have a German-style worker council or not, I'm going to talk about that, you're not going to have a job. The late William Hutt, London School of Economics, used to say this about labor. about jobs. He was a specialist in the field of labor economics. He said, remember this, consumers hire and consumers fire at will without a second thought. Now, given that, you're doing well because you're making a good product and people are wanting to buy it. Now, Honda, he's mentioned Toyota, Honda, Ohio, workers, by the way, in a state where unions are quite dominant, but they don't have a union. They're doing extremely well because Honda is doing well. In fact, Honda, Ohio workers are so well compensated that the UAW, though it has tried time and time again, cannot get those workers to give them the time of day. They can't. That is why the UAW is now looking south, but they have a problem. We're going to talk about it. Aside from the fact that Southerners are strange people. Now, I don't sound as if I'm from the South, do I? Actually, I was born and raised in Memphis. That, I think, is still the South, okay? Now, Honda, Ohio is doing so well that they're adding a new line for their upscaled Acura. And this is the fascinating thing. They are making Accords to sell in Japan. I taught in Japan in 1977 as a visiting professor. And when I'd gotten there and I got in the cab to be taken to where I was supposed to go, I was convinced that the cabbie was going to kill me because he was driving on the wrong side of the road. It's only then that I figured out why his steering wheel was on the wrong side of the car. So Honda in Ohio is making cars which they're exporting to Japan. That's how successful they are. Look, your income, your frame of life as a worker is determined by consumers. I emphasize that, not by a union. Now, VW has been in the car making business in America before. They were in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. They were there from 1978 to 1988. Now, I was giving a speech in Los Angeles in January 1979, and the man who, by the way, had been a Hillsdale College graduate, who was the new VP for that operation in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, was there, and he came to me and he was so excited about what they were going to be able to do. And I wished him well. But it totally failed. It failed because the product was simply not competitive. And the UAW represented the workers in that plant, and it made absolutely no difference at all. In fact, 6 months after the plant opened, UAW staged a wildcat strike for salaries equal to those that were being received by workers at General Motors, a gigantic difference of 66 cents an hour. They were willing to shut the plant down for that. In 1992, a New York Times article noted that the UAW's contribution to the plant was this. Here's the direct quote from the New York Times. The plant began with a strike and lurched from problem to problem before closing. Now, if that plant, and I do not know this, had also had a German-style worker council, I don't know. It's not clear. But I'm going to comment on that in a moment. Let's talk about American labor law. It's already been mentioned, but mention it again. The National Labor Relations Act, known as the Wagner Act, 1935. That law, even though it's been amended twice, still, at its core, grants VW employees here in Chattanooga every legal right to have a union. The fact that Tennessee's a right-to-work state has nothing to do with that. The employees at the VW facility here have every right to have a union if they want to. All you have to have are 30% of the employees sign a card indicating that they want to have a secret ballot election held in the oversight of the National Labor Relations Board. Secret ballot, that determines whether or not there is a union. Now, let's suppose they got a union. It's not likely that the first thing the UAW would want to do would be to sit down and negotiate wages. This is what happened, of course, in Westmoreland. Wages equal to what entry-level workers currently make at General Motors, Chrysler Fiat, and Ford. They wouldn't want to do that because VW employees actually make more than current workers at GM make. In fact, they have overall superior levels of compensation and work environments than what exists in the old plants. This had to be done. It had to be done because when that moment came that General Motors finally had to acknowledge that we're dead. And in the years I was in Michigan, I actually did a lot of consulting for the Michigan Manufacturers Association, wrote articles for them, petitioned the state to restructure its business tax system, which took them years to change. Did all of that, got to know a lot of the people in the plants, and also got to know some of the UAW people simply because my father was a union organizer, and my oldest brother was the vice president and chief negotiator for the United Rubber Workers Union. So I grew up in a union family. In fact, we had a picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the wall. And when my oldest aunt discovered that I voted Republican, she said, "I hope you go to hell." So I know something about, sweet person, but I know something about the life. My father was a factory worker. I worked the night shift at International Harvester in the plant in Memphis and went to school in the daytime. And my oldest brother did that at Firestone, worked the night shift, went to school in the daytime. And then when he was admitted to law school, he went to law school at night and worked in the plant in the daytime. So that's our culture. It's good. But in the course of that, what I discovered was this, that the guy or gal on the line who has the union never bothers to even go to a union meeting, because the union is irrelevant to them until the union's activities, which, by the way, work to enhance union membership by imposing in contract negotiations restrictive work rules, which make it have to be the case that it now takes more employees to make a vehicle or whatever than was previously the case. The companies, by the way, sign on to that foolishly to avoid a strike. But the time comes when you can no longer do that. And when that happens, the plant shuts down. Why? Because at some point, the company cannot survive in a competitive market. Its bottom line goes negative, goes negative, goes negative, and they have to be asked to be bailed out, which is what happened with GM. Not Ford, with GM. And Chrysler, which was acquired by Fiat. Now, at that point, the UAW had to suddenly see the light and agree to entry-level wages below what entry-level wages are here. All right, I want to talk about the German Works Council model. I have a feeling that there's sort of the scent of threat in the air in this community. It's not being admitted by the company, or for that matter, by the UAW. It seems to be coming from the Volkswagen Group Works Council, which has stated, as reported in the Times Free Press, the following. We, this is June 22nd, we, that is the Works Council, not the company, will only agree to an extension of the site or any other model contract, there's your SUV, until it is clear how to proceed with employees, representatives of the United States. Say, you have a union in that plant, and we will consent to your getting a new model. Now, the we here is, in fact, the Workers' Council. Has an interesting history in Germany. I'm going to give you a detail on what it actually does. By the way, here's a little hidden note. It's not necessary for Volkswagen Chattanooga employees to have a union to have a German-style Works Council. Now, and this is important, if the German model is followed without a union and without regard for the provisions of the Wagner Act, it won't work. Because instantly, the AFL-CIO would file suit to block that activity. Because American labor law does not permit anything that smacks of a company union. So it's either a union or it's not. That's what the Labor Council is saying. By the way, you don't have to be a union member to be in the Works Council in Germany. And for that matter, the company itself in Germany does not even have to be organized by a union. But we're not talking about Germany. We're talking about the United States. And the Works Council wants to adopt in Volkswagen's the only un-Works Council operation in all of Volkswagen. They want to adopt the Works Council model here. And you have to have a union to do that. Let me tell you what a Works Council does. And I've read their literature. First of all, at the local site where the Works Council is in place, and this presumes the existence of a union, the council will represent all employees, not the union, but the council. Now, the members of the council have special protection against dismissal. In fact, it's been said that the worker council are actually undismissible. So once they're in forever. Council meetings are not open to the public. By the way, the trade union which is in place in Germany, that is IG Metall, in Germany has the right to attend council meetings, but it can only be there as an advisor because all final decisions are made by the council. The company pays for everything associated with the council, including compensation for members and training. Council has, under German law, what are called co-determination rights. For example, the company is not able to implement any entrepreneurial action regarding labor or capital ratios in the operation, new tools, new systems of production, cannot do anything like that without the council's permission. Personal approval, the council can intervene if the company imposes smoking bans or requires dress codes or requires you to have name tags. The council says no, it can't happen. The council determines the beginning and end of working hours, including breaks. It has the final say in whether or not you'll have overtime hours. It also has final say in all general policies about holidays or days off. Everything that could be associated with the standard sort of decisions of management in Germany, the Works Council has final authority over, including the structure of wages. That is, IG Metall will negotiate wages company-wide, but at the plant level, the Workers' Council determines how that's divvied up, the structure of wages. They determine how bonuses are distributed, how premiums are distributed, and any other performance-related benefits. In essence, the adoption of the German model for worker council essentially would render the UAW as nothing more than the entity which collects dues. That's it. You would have in place, if you get UAW, however well-intentioned the UAW is, you wake up the next day and you have the German Workers' Council model, which says to the UAW, hello, shut up. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. That is contrary, historically, to the unionization model that exists in the United States. Because in the United States, under labor law, the union is not Detroit, it's the local. The local. The UAW Solidarity House, headquarters in Detroit, is in fact the International, but the union is a collection of locals, not under German labor law. A Volkswagen Chattanooga Works Council can exist, but under the Wagner Act, only if there's a union in place. If there's no union in place, the German model becomes irrelevant. People who are wanting to push the union, UAW is happy to go along because they are financially in serious trouble. After all, recall that not only have they lost enormous numbers of members, but given that a union is a business in the business of selling memberships, that the loss of those members has caused a tremendous drop in their stream of income. And they have taken, I think, a $12 billion piece of General Motors to cover the pensions and health care of retired UAW members, who, by the way, are half again more than current UAW members. The UAW has implicitly admitted it's desperately in need of members. The German Works Council will allow them to collect the dues, but have nothing to say about anything else. So if the German model is instituted, it becomes a little more, UAW becomes a little more than a dues recipient, because the real power will lie with the Workers' Council. But here's the interesting thing about Workers' Councils. Workers' Councils create in the plant an accommodative and cooperative rather than adversarial relationship. Guess what? You don't need a council to have that. That's a question of smart management. That's all it is. Smart management knows this. Our bottom line is bigger, the happier and more productive our employees are. That's it. So we're going to do whatever we can to help them be successful. And by the way, that helps us be successful too. You don't need a union to do that. Well, we shall see. Thanks.